Time for VUC. In our 11th year, with us on our journey this year, Simwood.com. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Greenfield Tech. Go to greenfield.tech and see how they can make your tech dreams both feasible and affordable. Our conference bridge is the best you'll ever find at zipdx.com. VUC.me is hosted on Bluehost. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are provided by voxphone.com. Alrighty, thanks for the pre-roll from Michael. I just have to show myself for 1 second. That's me. Hello, folks. We've been doing this for almost 11 years, and this is VUC664, September 22nd, 2017, as some say. We're really pleased to have Martin Geddes with us, and I just wanted to make this one quick announcement because Martin was last on the VUC, as per my records, December 2013. So we're talking about a large part of the internet lifetime. And he has a fantastic newsletter that you'll want to subscribe to if you're interested in the things that we're going to be talking about with him. And you can do that the most easily by Googling his name, Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N-G-E-D-D-E-S, Martin Geddes, and you will find his site. Go to the site and sign up for that newsletter. And that's all from me. We're turning it over to Mr. James Bodie, who is going to lead this session with Martin, who is on ZipDX. So you'll be seeing slides from him. And here's a preview of that slide. First slide. James, take it away.
Thank you, Randy. And hello, Martin. How wonderful to converse with you. Unfortunately, I'm just looking at the still picture of you on your slide. But do you want to introduce yourself to those people who, unlikely as it may sound, don't actually know who you are? Would you like to do the quick 30-second intro?
Sure, absolutely. I describe myself as a computer scientist, and I've kind of been sucked into the telecoms industry for the last 15 years and trying to figure out how it all works. I'm a compulsive troublemaker, and the particular trouble I'm making is looking for the theoretical foundations underneath all this packet networking stuff and kind of finding them missing and then hunting for the people who might actually have them. So I work alongside a team of applied mathematicians and also entrepreneurs and management kind of folks, and we're turning a series of breakthrough ideas into real technology and real services. So it's we're linking together fundamental maths to new mechanisms to new management methods for networks.
Well, that sounds pretty good to me. I've got to say, as an addendum to that little introduction, that I've known you, Martin, for now, what, 13, 14 years? And, well, I think so. We first met in San Francisco, I think. Something like that. Anyway, it seems like a lifetime. I actually had hair when we met. And I've come to know you as one of the brightest brains on the block when it comes to coming up with new stuff and very clever stuff. But what I will say about you is that you're heavy on the theory and and less so possibly on the practical side.
So we're talking practice very soon.
So, which is probably why you and I ought to do something together in the future, because I'm very much hands-on and practical and dangerous demo type person. But anyway, would you like to tell us about what today's exciting business is?
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit today about quality assured voice and video, about the reality of actually building it and doing it. So on previous talks I've given in public, I've talked about the theory and the maths and the science and the engineering. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because it's still relevant. But the thing I'm going to take us through is the context of a big business change, contextual change of moving to the cloud. And then talk about the specifics of Just Right Networks. So I and a team of colleagues have got a new startup, and we are implementing this stuff as the world's first commercially available quality assured voice and video service. So there's been a prototype version that's been running for a number of years that was not for commercial sale. and we're in the process of going live with that. So I think it's a very exciting moment in that everyone's had the experience of the internet being, let's just face it, a little bit shit. It's like we've all sat there and been on some Skype call or watching some movie, and you get the circle of death, or Granny suddenly all disappears and breaks up, and that isn't necessary. So we'd have to fix that.
That's well, it's very true. We deal with that on a weekly basis here on the VUC, and with the vagaries of Randy's VDSL circuit, and we end up actually running the show on over 3G, 4G circuits now and then. Anyway, that's probably a good intro to take you into your little presentation, isn't it?
Yes. So last time I got so excited about being on VUC that I managed to kick the power switch in the power strip in the middle of the webinar. Everything went black, and I go, oh crap. Anyway, I promise not to do that today. So yes, let's go through this. So next slide, please. So as you said, I have a website. If you want to learn more about me, this is my personal website rather than my company website. If you want to learn more about me and my interests, Martin Geddes. Next slide. So my grand hypothesis behind all this stuff is that we're at the tail end of one S-curve of growth of data services at the start of a new curve of growth. And so broadband internet access has been growing like crazy for the last 20 years. I was at a conference yesterday, and this is a version of that the talk I gave at the conference. And it was obvious that mobile is saturating, the revenues are starting to start to fall. It's that the broadband internet access model is now mature, and there's a new demand for cloud application access, and it comes in many forms. People are obviously working from home. They want unified comms that works. They are switching from broadcast TV to streaming TV and Netflix and the like. People want just stuff that just works, and that's requires a different way of engineering. But it's also about changing our paradigm from one which is in the broadband internet access, which is we'll give you this internet access and you have to figure out what it's useful for, to the other way around, which is you've got an application and we have to figure out how to build a network that does what it needs. Right? So it's traditional engineering. Next slide. So there is a precedent for this. I think it's a very good and strong precedent, which is we're not the first transport industry to go through a major transformation and revolution. So back in the 1950s and 60s, there was a series of innovations around the Connect box and then the proper container, the 20-foot container, and then the 40-foot container. And that transformed physical delivery of goods and services. And it shifted all the power balances as well in that industry. So beforehand, it was the shipping companies themselves, like the telcos today, who were really powerful and made people very, very rich. But it became over time the people who could do the intermodal logistics and coordinate many different kinds of goods and services being transported, essentially over many different kinds of transport, road, rail, sea and air, to deliver some specific kind of outcome for different customers and different needs. And it was the people who could combine together all those different modes of transport and solve the customer's problem who became the really powerful ones. And they ended up going back and then starting to buy and own the shipping lines. So it was a fundamental transformation, and there kind of were no fast followers. There's a whole new group of companies that grew up, and it wasn't the old shipping lines that entered into this new business. And it transformed the world. I believe we're about to see the same thing in telecoms, which is just like we saw in the cloud with virtualization and hypervisors, we saw containerization of the compute resource. We're now going to see a containerization, as it were, of the information delivery resource. And packet data was only the very, 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 very first step. There's another level of containerization that's required and flow management through these complex systems. Next slide. So in order to get on this new S-curve of growth, there are three things that are required. So And the first one is to not to try and build whole new kinds of networks or delivery systems. The first one is to figure out what actually we're delivering today. So it's about understanding the network quality flaw we currently have. And the quality flaw of broadband networks today isn't engineered, it's emergent. It's a property of all kinds of little random processes that all interact with each other, and something happens, and it changes, and it varies. And there's sometimes it's stable, sometimes it's unstable. You know, it's we've all experienced that unpredictability. And the first step is to understand what is it we currently are delivering, and to quantify that in a way which is not about just averages of packet loss and latency and jitter, but in a way that is directly relatable to the end user experience. So there's currently an engineering gap, which is the kinds of network metrics we're using are proxies for the experience and are correlated to the experience, but they're not directly causal of the experience. So we want to have a stronger set of metrics that are directly causal, and so we can start to do proper engineering with them. So go to the next slide. So here's one I made earlier. So our technology and science partner in delivering this quality assured broadband is a company called Predictable Network Solutions. And they're the maths and computer science geniuses who made the original breakthroughs here. And what we're doing is taking a series of techniques that were developed for very high-end big telcos, military, big governments, particle supercolliders, all that kind of stuff, to manage network performance. And we're kind of downsizing them to the ordinary every day. So if you think about how say an ultrasound scanner lets you see inside a human body, but a functional MRI scanner lets you really see what's going on. And so what we kind of built is the equivalent of a functional MRI scanner where you inject test packets into networks with a special statistical properties and watch what happens to them. And you get these sort of super high fidelity, high resolution pictures of what's going on inside. And so you need to start with the right raw data. And this right raw data is about capturing the probability distributions of what's going to happen to those individual packets as they traverse the network. So this is one way of visualizing some of that raw data we capture. So you've got these time traces of what's happened to these individual test packets. And the test packets are all different sizes. So on the right-hand side, you can see is there any structure in there about how the latency you're getting is correlated with packet size, or it's so to sort of give ourselves an understanding of where the flow constrictions might be in this system. Okay, so next slide. So the first step I said was to establish a quality flaw, and for that you need to have high fidelity metrics. The second step is to think about how the whole supply chain of delivering some kind of application experience comes together to deliver some kind of outcome. So we have maybe your Wi-Fi in your house attached to then maybe a DSL line, which then talks to some local networks and national networks, some international network, and then comes out the other side. And so that's the supply chain. Yeah. And at the moment, the internet we've built has a series of traffic interchange agreements, and they typically have no or weak quality requirements. So if we're going to start to engineer quality in these supply chains, then we need to have some kind of SLA. So we have an SLA that is expressed in a mathematical language, which is both relatable to the network and the user experience. And we build these quality contracts so that we can start to coordinate that supply chain. So next slide, give you some examples. So the critical thing, if you want to get a working application, there's some kind of acceptable rate of performance failure. We can't get rid of performance failure. We live in the real world. There'll always be some. Then you need the packets to arrive fresh enough. Right? It's if enough packets arrive that are fresh enough and without the awful fungus of time on them, then it works. So what we have to do is build a kind of a quality contract that says, it's the blue line here, which is If the packet delay is less than a certain amount, and you've kind of ignored the lower scale, it could be any scale, then we're okay. So if the black line is the cumulative distribution of how fresh the packets arrived, and if it's to the left of the blue line, we're in, right? It's we are doing better than the requirement. If, however, that black line starts to clip the corners of the blue line, it means we're in trouble. Is that we're at risk of not delivering the experience that we wanted to deliver, and this is just ordinary engineering. You know, it's we're trying to create a safety margin which is quantified and predictable. And if you're building a bridge or a skyscraper or a space shuttle, that's ordinary. We know what the safety margin is. In broadband today, the safety margin could be huge and positive. It could be negative. It comes and it goes. It changes all the time. It's like it's this crazy emergent world rather than an engineered world. So this is just an ordinary engineering requirement for a performance outcome. Next slide. Go next one. Oh yeah, ask this to check this. So the point being here, yes. So in terms of what we're doing differently at Just Right Networks is that we are engineering to a quality outcome here. So we are building networks in the opposite direction to how most of them are built today. So how they're normally built today is you deploy a series of cause mechanisms and stuff, and routing approaches and codecs in your system. And then once you've deployed it, you find out what it does. And then you start to tweak it to make it work better if it doesn't work well enough. We have the exact opposite, which is we start with the outcome we want, and this is the specification for the outcome, and then figure out what kind of mechanisms, if we put them all together, would deliver that outcome, which is how normally engineering works. But the first critical difference is we start with the requirement. Is that we want to deliver a particular application experience outcome for a particular application, and this is how we capture it. So next slide. Right, so that raw data I showed you earlier, with those packet traces and capturing the individual packets, allows us to construct, in this case it's in red rather than black, the appropriate wiggly line, and compare it against that, that requirement. So if you have to recognize that packet networking is by definition statistical multiplexing. That's what it is. And it's statistical at heart, and therefore the metrics you need to use have to be statistical. And when we try to use simple little scalars like average, loss, and delay, we've lost the critical information that we really need. So we're building a contract between supply and demand here, which is expressed in a statistical language. And we're trying to compare those two together. So it's to make sure we at least deliver on what the requirement is. Next slide. Right. So we've established, firstly, this calibrate, which is you can start to measure what the current networks are delivering and what quality flaw they have. Secondly is coordinate, which is figuring out what is the requirement the application has and how can we express that as a quality contract. And ultimately, how can we decompose that contract into a sort of series of contracts for a whole supply chain? The third thing you need to be able to do is control. So we're delivering quality assured broadband here. So we have to have mechanisms that deliver on the contract. And that means taking resources and taking them away from where they're not needed and giving them to where they are needed. So that means we have to view the network not as kind of a pipe delivering bandwidth, which kind of has a quality as a secondary aspect, but we directly have to figure out how to trade around the quality. And what my Mathmo friends have cracked is how to do that. So next slide. So this isn't a theory. This is from the first generation version of this technology, which was running for a number of years. It was originally built to do video sign language for the deaf in Wales. And this is data taken from that first generation one. We're in the process of deploying the second generation. I'll talk about that later. So on the left-hand side, you've got standard broadband, and this is, it's all over the place a bit. On the right-hand side is you've got quality assured, where you've got multiple classes of service, and In this case, it's playing, actually, it was the BBC iPlayer application that was being played. And you can tell there's a very, very different level of control over these two things. So it's a new kind of network my colleagues have built. It's called a polyservice network, and has multiple classes of service. And each class of service has a strictly defined quality floor and or ceiling. Because when you take resources away from one thing and give it to something else, then you make something worse and something else better. So if you're going to deliver high quality assured voice and video, that means you must simultaneously be delivering low quality something else. Yeah. So you have to construct an economy class that is still useful whilst you're constructing a superior class for the voice and video. And the current QoS mechanisms, even if they do sometimes work and deliver high quality voice and video, in the process, they destroy the value of what's left. They take far too much resource away from what's left and give far too much to the voice and video. And you end up with something that's just useless for anything. So my colleagues have constructed a thing that is still useful for doing overnight backups, the operating system upgrades, your Dropbox syncing in the economy class. But that economy class is totally isolated mathematically from the high quality classes. Next slide. Right. So draw back a bit, is that there's some things that have to change in this industry. So if you're building wireless antennas, then the underlying maths for doing that was developed in the 17th centuries, and complex analysis, 18th century. The physics was done in the 19th century, like Maxwell's wave equations, and the technology was done in the 20th century, like MIMO antennas. And here we are in the 21st century. Yeah, it all works fine. If you're doing spectrum policy, there are no arguments about physics. However, in our world of packet networking, it's all a bit backwards, which is we started building them in the 1970s, and we again started to think about the theory in the 1990s, and we now just about realized we missed out the maths. So it's all backwards. So there's a new branch of maths required. You can think of it as the complex numbers of a probability, and it's about taking loss and delay, and rather than being two separate things, is we put them into a single mathematical model. So imagine if you're trying to supply water to a house, you have a single metric of how much water do you deliver, liters. If you were trying to deliver electricity to a house, how much electricity do you consume? Watts. Right? Well, what's the unit of supply and demand in broadband? Well, at the moment, we have multiple units. We have loss and delay, or jitter, or whatever. We have several units that all have some kind of coupling between them. And so we created this unmanageable engineering problem because you have too many units. So there's a way of collapsing that problem into a single unit space. And it requires thinking about the problem a little bit differently. So that's the idea of quality attenuation. And then quantifying it differently. And there's a new branch of maths called delta Q, which does it. So the reason why we can actually do quality assured broadband is because we have a sensible unit in which to talk about the resource, and as well as having clever new mechanisms for doing the scheduling, etc. But if you don't have the right maths, it's like if you're trying to do engineer wireless antennas and you've never cracked imaginary numbers, you're in trouble. It's not going to work. And so we're missing something really basic here. So we have to have new metrics. Next one. So secondly, new architectures. What we're doing today in the current internet is very much like, say, the break bulk shipping that was happening in the past, the cargo shipping, before we containerized. We have this great sludge of data that all goes along together. And we end up trying to deliver everything with the cost structure of the most quality demanding flows, like voice and video, but the revenue structure of the bulk data, and it's all absolutely insane. And the customers aren't happy. There's no secret the current internet isn't delivering great outcomes, and people are trying to do things about it, like with active queue management, but it ain't going to solve the problem. So we need to go back to basics and recognize there are some foundational things we need to fix in terms of our distributed computing. And we made some pretty basic design mistakes in the current internet. So we need to start thinking about how to fix some of those, because there's an external reality and it's got constraints, and they're going to impose themselves, but they already are. And the course we're currently on of trying to botch it and fix it over and over again ain't fixing it. So I was at a conference yesterday. There was Dan Warren, who's the head of 5G for Samsung. On his slide, it said TCP/IP not fit for purpose. Right. So don't just take it from me. it's a widely understood meme that we need to go back to the basement and fix on the foundations. Next. So what I think is coming, and this could be 10 years out, is a new business model for networking. That maybe looks a little bit like, say, the Visa network is for exchange agreements in the financial services and banking industry. So in today's internet, there are no quality flaws that are defined typically. You get what you get, and if you don't like it, that's a shame. It's in a future network, which is fit for purpose for a variety of applications and uses, there will be money attached to delivering more resources for better quality, and there will be costs attached to doing it, and therefore there'll be incentives for cheating. So we will have to have trusted intermediaries who help to allow those sets of agreements to form, and so that when networks exchange traffic, they don't feel obliged to go and audit every other network in the world. So we will see a retrofitted over time, and possibly might start in enterprise networks. It may not be on the public internet as such. The ability to measure the current quality flaw, define what quality flaw you really want, and build the appropriate contracts, and have a set of contracts that when you compose them all together, deliver a working application, will be coming. So I think we'll see new business models emerge, new intermediaries, and a new kind of internet, effectively. It's effectively if the essence of the internet is about how you exchange traffic, how that exchange will be done will change in a number of ways, not least of which will be it will be done both on the global scale, but also even on the personal scale. So as we move to IoT and sort of the industrial internet, then we will see new kinds of interchange agreements, smart agreements, and even the coinification of the blockchainification of networks happen as well. And the cumulative effect, next slide, is a new industry. So we will effectively see the end of the current cloud and telecoms industry as being separate entities, and it will be all just digital logistics. That is the new industry. And it's going to be a bit of a painful birth, because it means letting go of some cherished beliefs from the past about who we are, what we do. So next slide. To wrap up this bit, I see that there are exactly 10, no more than, no less, transformations up ahead between this broadband internet world and the cloud application world. So if you can run through this quickly. So the current quality flaw of broadband internet is not engineered. We're building these lovely cathedrals. They're very beautiful and great places, and there'll be fabulous tourist attractions in the future. However, it's emergent. We need to adopt ordinary engineering, be able to define a requirement and deliver to that requirement with a known safety margin, which means the user experience will go from being built with a backwards thing of purpose for fitness, well, here it is, I hope you find it useful, to fitness for purpose, which is what we expect from our water supply, from our electricity supply, any other utility service. It should be fit for purpose. And to do that, we need to change the resource model. So today, we're selling bandwidth, everything's about speed, and that bandwidth turns up with some kind of quality, which may be invisible to the end user, but they know it doesn't deliver the outcomes they need. The future is that we will deliver a quantity of quality. So quality will become a first-class member of our engineering models, our pricing policies and plans. It will change its importance. We're going to have a quality revolution. So and this happened, in car manufacturing and process manufacturing years ago. They went through the whole lean and Six Sigma thing. Well, it's time for telecoms to go through that too, and broadband. We have the exact opposite of lean networks at the moment, maximum work in progress rather than minimum. So because we have not applied those principles, the quality of experience defect rate of the service we offer is unlike anything else we experience in modern life. You know, it's there is no other product or service we put up with which has the failure rates that broadband offers us. That needs to be fixed. But things will still fail, so we need to go from having basically product and randomly change things approach to fault management to one with automated fault isolation. So when things go wrong, we'll immediately know where and why, because we know which contract has been broken, which performance technical contract has been broken. Now, the thing that's the incentive is always money, and there will have to be money attached to delivering assurance. So assurance isn't just merely making the application work, it's being able to prove you made it work so you can bill for it. So there'll be sort of additional capabilities to show that not only did we make your voice and video delight the user, but that we didn't fake it. So that's what assurance is about. And when we change the incentives, that will change the pricing model, which moved from today being commodity bandwidth to selling differentiated application outcomes. This service I'm delivering you is fit for Skype for Business, or fit for Salesforce, or fit for whatever. But because the quality contracts are an increasing complexity, this is a bit like with CDNs. You know, is that it's only a whole sort of wholesale users and enterprises who are really set up for dealing with quality contracts, not your mum and dad. And so we'll see a shift in emphasis, and this has already happened a bit with CDNs, where it's the internal telco to telco, or telco to distribution partner, or telco to cloud, where these contracts get managed, and they'll be hidden from the end user. It'll be wrapped up into your SaaS fee or whatever. I think there'll be a revolution in the level of efficiency. So what we're doing at Just Right Networks is to be able to run networks at 100% load while still being able to deliver quality assurance. So today we're using huge amounts of idleness. It's not really super fast networks, they're super idle networks and super fat to deliver the quality requirement. That isn't sustainable. Indeed, it is worse than not sustainable, is that there's basic protocol breakdown that's happening in the internet. It's not very easy. It's not very easily visible unless you have these high fidelity metrics. But as we make networks go faster and faster and faster, we're creating new kinds of scaling problems, which are having bad effects. And so the internet is not a scale-free system. There are scaling limits. We've seen them hit. By moving to the lean model, we can transcend those. I believe it will also be a freeing act, because today you make money from building a spectrum cartel or a access oligopoly for the fixed lines. And the bottleneck in these ecosystems will move. It will be less like a pipe thing and more like financial services and derivatives or futures, with the trading platform, the supply and demand. And it's the people who have the strongest insight into present and future demand and who control the trading platform who make the money. Next slide. So that's kind of the formal content bit. Let's tell you about what we're up to. So Just Right Networks is a startup. We've been going for a year. We build virtual quality networks. So we don't build whole new kinds of networks from the ground up, not yet. Yeah, that's a few years away. What we're doing is taking existing networks and calibrating them, so understanding what quality floor they're currently delivering, and then working to coordinate those supply chains, and then to take control over the experience as necessary. And so the virtual quality network is a bit like if you've got a VPN, so a virtual private network, that isolates traffic based on different security requirements. So a VQN, a virtual quality network, isolates traffic based on different performance requirements. And you can also imagine a little light in your taskbar on your laptop, and having a bad internet day, hit the VQN button, okay, and it'll manage the traffic differently. So what we're building is what we've built is a platform for, think of it as doing packet scheduling as a service. So we have a partner in Scotland, SureTech, who we're working with, who are a well-established, well-respected provider of voice services and data services. to mostly small business or medium-sized businesses. So it could be hotel chains and travel agents, estate agents, high street chains. And we're working with them to deploy the technology that our science partners at Predictable Network Solutions developed in the past and productize it. So the downstream system is live and being in the process of being configured at the moment, and we're going to we're running a field trial, and we're inviting partners to join in. It's obviously a sort of free activity, and it's a platform on which people can come and experience what is actually possible, even over today's infrastructure. So what we're doing is taking the infrastructure that, in this case, BT Wholesale have built, and because there is regulated access to it, we don't need to ask for any permission. And we're wrapping that infrastructure, and we're scheduling the packets in a very different way to what everyone else does. So rather than injecting all the packets as fast as possible, and believing you create as much value as possible by moving packets as quickly as possible, we inject them as slow as possible, at the last possible moment at which they can go, which is or the first possible moment where they can go where they don't meet any packet that we sent earlier. It's a lean model in that we're minimizing the work in progress of the network rather than maximizing it, which gives us the maximum possible level of control over those flows. So we're kind of arbitraging the BT network. We're looking at the difference between the underlying quality it delivers, which is emergent rather than engineered, and the quality that any particular application requires, and we're resharing that network to extract the difference. And it works. Is that this is not a theory? It's a proven pragmatic technique, but it does require changing your fundamental belief about networks, which is that networks do work. They don't do work, and therefore moving the packets as fast as possible isn't a good idea. So we've cracked the maths for how to do it and how to go backwards from one of those blue line requirements, and configure the mechanism to deliver exactly that, to that particular line. And it does require a lot of new maths. And it's not in the textbooks. It's not in any university courses. It's not the way that people currently think about networks. It's not part of the current paradigm. However, it's real. So it works in practice, and whether it works in theory is left as an exercise to the reader. I also see this as a first step. It's a first step into building this new performance engineered digital supply chains. And I believe that really what's required is more than just one company. It's a whole industry initiative. And I'm considering at the moment, and I'd like to talk to people maybe who are on this call about, do we need some kind of network quality floor foundation where we can bring the tools that we've got, so the measurement systems, and the mechanisms, into a much wider audience, and let people play with it. But it has to be done on some kind of reasonably sustainable basis, and not as a charity activity. So my question is to people who are participating in this webinar is, how can we make that happen? It's I've spent the last 7 years working to bring the theory into the world and bring the mechanisms, and that now requires opening up to a much wider group of people. So we look forward to more people participating, and this being the start of a wonderful journey on that next S-curve of growth.
Okay, wow.
Thank you.
As usual, Martin, you've delivered something which is thought-provoking, and I've been making notes here. I've got about 20 or 30 questions here, but I'm guessing that there are lots of other people on the call who also have questions, and I'm looking at Mr. Corrado.
Yes.
There, who is twitching with with questions. So, do you want to go first, Corrado?
Just a couple of questions and one information. I mean, because I'm in Scotland, I know very well Gavin Henry. We are partnering with him with a number of products, and I'll be getting back in touch with him to know if we can do something to help you out and to test these kind of networks, because we have a number of clients that are very likely to be benefiting from this kind of technology.
Yep.
That's a thing that we will do. One note from my very low level of experience in networks is that now the cost is not by speed or the size of the pipe, but how much traffic you put through. So cost is probably no longer a driver to get a network that delivers in correct time and with the right priority. I don't think that's a driver, and we could possibly disregard the fact that we have excessive speeds. That's already almost paid by itself. So if we have excessive speeds, we can keep them. Like when we have a supply of 40,000 watts available, ampere or whatever in the house that we never use, but it's there if we ever need to.
Okay, so there's something important here, which is about the relationship between quantity and quality, and it's widely misunderstood. So you're right in one sense, which is that in various pricing and metering points in networks today, the meter is running on quantity. Yeah, so if you're a ISP in the UK and you're buying from OpenReach or BT Wholesale or whatever, yeah, they'll charge you per gigabyte. However, the underlying think of it as resource cost rather than financial cost is attached to quality, not quantity. The thing that actually costs money to deliver is timeliness. And if you can wait forever for something to happen, then it has no cost, right? It's like we can put it onto a DVD, put it in the post. It's like, yeah, it arrives 2 weeks later. Tough. It's like so it's the timeliness that has the actual underlying resource cost. And this is kind of a mathematical truth about the world. And the way we're building networks today is that they often, particularly access networks, have to be incredibly idle in order to reduce the contention to an acceptable level. And so if the effective cost of quality is really, really high, because of it isn't just the bandwidth that the application uses, it's the enormous amount of idleness that has to be sat there. And the idleness can't be maintained. It's called non-stationarity, is that the statistical stability of these networks is going away because of how we built protocols. So, and I will be publishing a public presentation very soon on non-stationarity, because the regulators are becoming very interested in it. So stationarity is the new speed, quality is the new quantity, and they're starting to wrap their heads around it. So it's probably a bit more than the scope of this webinar to go into the details of the relationship between quantity and quality and how it all works. But the historical belief that you can deliver quality through quantity, it was true for a while, but for a series of technical reasons, it is breaking down and will become less true and goes into reverse. So we have to change. We can't keep doing it the way we did.
No, I agree. We are at a point where the networks that have been deployed are there and are probably sufficient if we introduce your model. And they will be sufficient for a while.
Yes, it's about how it's not about how much resource we have, it's about how we go about allocating and dividing up that resource to different users and uses. And we need to become a bit more sophisticated in how we do that.
Absolutely, I agree. James.
So James has 34 other questions. Go ahead, James.
Roll it. You're still muted.
For free, and I charge James consultancy fee after the third question.
James, you're still muted.
Yeah, I know.
There he goes.
This unmuting thing is a bane in my life. So, coming back to you, Martin, you asked a question of the audience, and your question was how challenging people to see how we're going to get the mechanism that Just Right Networks has defined and get it into use. And my thought there is that we already have a mechanism to do that, and that is that you take your theory and your procedure, your protocol, whatever it is, to the IETF, and you get it standardized. And then if it's good, then lots of people introduce it.
I got some bad news for you. So, I mean, how can I put this in a caring, compassionate, polite way? Which is, but the IETF doesn't do engineering. Okay, it's not an engineering organization. It is constitutionally built to explore the possible success modes of broadband networks, packet networks, and it has been fabulously successful at that. However, it is not an engineering organization where people are professionally accredited to take responsibility for the failure modes. So the IETF is not, and we're about failure mode engineering, not success mode engineering. And for a long list of reasons, the IETF is constitutionally and conceptually not equipped for doing that. Now, there's some other things we do. So the real first step is about getting the measurement system into the world and the right metrics. So there is an underlying science to this. If you go to qualityattenuation.science, it will currently redirect to a Google Doc, but I've captured a lot of that science out there, and I've been giving it away for free for years, right? So I've created this huge body of knowledge at my own expense, public knowledge, and that needs to be curated. And there's curriculums I've been teaching to the R&D labs of the equipment vendors and stuff, which need to be tidied up and published properly. And there's only one me, you know. And when I go to Tesco, trying to give telecoms advice at checkout doesn't really get you past the checkout. So at some point there has to be some vaguely sustainable model by which that body of science and a reference measurement system, which also at some level rewards the people who produced it. You know, my colleagues at P and Sol have spent 15 years working on this. They've got mortgages to pay. It's so I'm thinking of what I'm thinking of is a network quality floor foundation with sponsors who help to bring this into the world, build the website, curate a community, maybe we can run webinars, run events. It's put out there a basic measurement system which anyone can use. So I've got a demo measurement system which is running on my home broadband here, which is fascinating results. But at the moment, I haven't got a business model to share it with anyone else. It's and this feels like a relatively easily fixable problem. Right? So so I don't want to build. The impact I want to have, and my colleagues want to have, is to maximally distribute this into the world. We do not want to create a small little island of profitability which lets us retire a little bit early, but everyone else, you know, bad luck. It's so we'd love to get this into everyone's hands. We just need to find a way of doing it that respects our effort and the huge costs we've had.
Okay. Well, said that the IETF is broken. We do have another mechanism for sharing really clever things with lots of people, and that is you go ahead and open source. Where's that echo coming back from?
Yes, the open source route is a yes and. I would love to be able to find a way of doing that. However, I also need to find a way of making sure that my colleagues' mortgages are paid. So there are Red Hat type models, whatever, that can do that. Just that it takes time and effort to go and take the IPR, package it up in the right way, so I think it's a conversation that anyone who's interested in this stuff and is either as a user participant or as a possible sponsor of these things. So the science and engineering requires sponsorship. Yeah, get it out there. It's very simple. You know, it's and I can't spend my tight days running around the world to the IETF. I can't afford it. It's like it's so if this is going to move forward into the world as a community activity, the community needs to stamp up and help do it. It's I've I've run out of resources. So it's and I would invite anyone who's interested in that to get in touch with me. You know, it's I'm easy to find.
Okay, well, how about running it as a crowdfunded project?
That's an option as well. Yes, and it requires behind the crowdfunding activity a movement of people who have a collective interest in greatly accelerating the adoption of high fidelity metrics and new mechanisms.
Well, I think all the people that listen to the VUCs certainly have a vested interest in that. And I think probably Randy is probably number one on that list. Anyway, changing the subject very slightly from the tricky practical challenges of introducing a new technology to a very simple question. This new unit, a combination of loss and delay in a single unit, you can't call it a delta Q. You've got to give it a proper name, like a GED. So you have Geddes. How many Geddes are you running at the moment?
You're touching on really quite an interesting question, which is so the underlying reality of this network is it's all probabilistic and stochastic. Yeah, it's all random processes, right? And so it's a bit like quantum mechanics, is that it does kind of weird stuff. And if it's, you have to explain then to ordinary users, you know, put it into their world and their terms. And it's a bit like, say, if you've got a gyroscope and you ask, well, why does that gyroscope precess? And you say, well, I solve the equations, and that's what it does. Well, but why? Well, no, I solve the equations, that's what it does. It's like there's a challenge of how to represent this stuff in a way that different levels of the ecosystem can cope with, because there's an underlying reality here that ain't going away. And currently the way we're engineering these systems and selling them isn't aligned to that reality. And yeah, the value is in the timeliness and the quality, the costs are in the timeliness and the quality, the current revenue model is in the quantity. Spot the fundamental tectonic problem that's ripping apart the industry. So that has to change, but the quality thing requires going beyond simple little scalars. Yet we still need to be able to express to the end users, this is a kind of 3-star thing for doing voice. Yeah, this is a 5-star one. And that's an interesting problem.
You're right. Yeah,
James,
the problem is how you express the metrics in a simple to understand manner that ordinary individuals who are not PhD mathematicians can understand.
Yes.
James, we need to remind people that they can hit *6 to unmute on ZipDX. We have several people, and they may have questions or comments.
Yeah, anybody on ZipDX? David Heaps, Gil Osher, or even Jasenka Rapajic. You're all in there. Any questions from ZipDX?
Or if you have a pronounceable name, you can also chime in.
Yeah, the joys of being multimodal. Just diving in there again, Martin, you actually said a word that immediately got me excited. You said that you have a working demo of some kind of user interface.
So the measurement system. Everyone looks at the mechanism and say, "My God, the clever new cause mechanism I want to play." It's like, sorry, can't go there. It's for the longest reasons that's down the road, right? However, we have a working demo measurement system, and I've been handing out a small pool of demo licenses to industry mates and saying, "Get this running and see what you find." Now, I need to have some way of scaling that, both in an operational way and also finding some way of rewarding the people who put it together. But it's not money isn't the defining limitation here. So I've been talking to like telecom research institutes. Is could we get this hosted and managed by one of them, and in order to let everyone have access to this, because there's some real costs as well. It's like all that data has to go up into Amazon that gets processed. Yeah, there's an AWS bill you get at the end of the month, and it's not zero. There has to be some kind of commercial infrastructure to support it. But I think it's at a this is a very affordable level. I think it's a kind of it's like a business model. If you got if you're selling fast food, you give away the straws and you charge the hamburgers, and these are the straws. So ability for people to do basic.
And you're saying you're running the core infrastructure on Amazon. It's the sort of thing that perhaps Amazon or one of the other cloud service providers might like to sponsor, because we're not talking about massive amounts of processing.
This is
this, are we?
Yeah. So I think I would love, after this call, James, you'll get one of my licenses, okay? And we'll figure out together how we can go about engaging this with community, because I want to get this into the hands of everybody on this call who listens to this podcast or webinar, whatever. It's and I just need to find a way of doing that within the resource constraints I have.
Okay, the code that you've got that you're licensing, what sort of platform is required to run that?
Right, so on my laptop in front of me, and also on the iMac behind it, I've got a virtual machine which is running the endpoint of the measurement system, which emits the test packets, which then head off towards one of several Amazon instances, which are getting reflected back, and the timing of those packets as they leave and pass various intermediate points and come back is all captured. And all that timing data then gets sucked up into Amazon, munged through some clever algorithms, and turned into these WQ high fidelity images of networks. So that's the virtual machine is running Ubuntu inside it, and that can be deployed on a PC, on a Mac, and it can be deployed as small dedicated kind of embeddable devices. It's so it's a thing that everyone can play with, but I just need to find a technical and commercial model that makes it worth my while. Okay, well, actually, getting somebody to build it into something like OpenWRT, the most popular, I think it's still the most popular open source router software. If you built into that as a module, that could work quite well. I'm looking at Corrado here.
Yeah. Or pfSense.
Or pfSense, indeed, our favorite firewall, which is going great guns at the moment. The latest release is absolutely stupendous.
And we have the right people to speak to.
Yes, we certainly do, don't we? Because we were only discussing the other day about having somebody from pfSense on to talk about the latest developments in pfSense world. So there's an idea.
Yeah, which they immediately said that they weren't interested.
Yeah, but probably because you asked the wrong question to the wrong person, didn't you? So just because somebody said they're not interested doesn't mean that we give up. We just go round that obstacle and try again in a different direction.
Very much like your dating strategy in high school, James.
Yes, darling.
That is off topic, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
And TMI.
No, I'm hugely impressed with what you're doing here, Martin. It's got all the hallmarks of a super duper Geddes plan, and I know that if it can be made practicable, it will change the way the internet works. So the challenge is how we actually get it into people's hands, as always.
Yeah. This is the start of a conversation about how we do that.
Yeah, indeed. Now, come on, there must be more people with questions lurking around. Any questions on IRC? Who's watching IRC? Because I'm not. I'm watching it.
We are, but there's nothing there.
So let me take an angle. This is Michael. Let me take a slightly different tact on it, because over here in the US, we're having, we're revisiting the traditional idea of network neutrality. And I guess the question is, to what extent do those distractions hinder our actual forward progress? I mean, should we just discard what we have now? There's a lot of people getting very excited, and to what end?
By what we have now, you mean in terms of the legal and regulatory framework?
Yes.
Okay. Here's what you need to understand about net neutrality. Is neutral networks do not exist. There is no such thing, never has been. It's a meaningless term. There is no phenomenon called neutrality that can be measured in networks. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the very intrinsic nature. It is a thing invented by a series of probably well-meaning lawyers. The current framing of net neutrality is a non-existent and non-implementable thing. And Ofcom have produced research that shows that, right? So this is not happening. There is no way of telling the difference between statistical flukes and intentional damage. It can't be done, right? Either in principle nor in practice. So stop, give up, walk away. However, we can define and regulate quality flaws. So neutrality is about how the individual little mechanisms result in a particular outcome, and then trying to reverse engineer from the outcome, was the mechanism engaged in a neutrality violation? Can't be done, right? However, we can look at the overall service and say, what's the quality flaw? So it's about, rather than trying to say who got the cream above the quality flaw and what did the right people get the cream, is you should talk about how much cream is there. Right? It's and how much shit is there mixed in with this milk. It's a so the appropriate method is to use those old common carriage concepts, but instantiate them as a quality flaw and not neutrality. Abandon the concept of neutrality. It can't be done.
And from a purely legal and regulatory perspective, it kind of means casting off all that exists and letting things.
It means abandoning the dead end that we were sent down 10 years ago by the neutrality nonsense, and going back to first principles and applying the well-established body of common carriage to within a rigorous scientific framework, which neutrality isn't. So all this thing about discrimination is meaningless. There's no way, it's undefined. Put it in a rigorous technical framework and execute to something that is. We do this in spectrum policy. Yeah, we don't try to do faster than light communications when we define spectrum policy. You'd be regarded as a bit odd, but neutrality is the equivalent of faster than light type of. It's not happening. It's like it's not in this universe. So we need to bolt it back down to the reality of statistical multiplexing and stochastic networks, because at the moment it's flapping around in some fantasy world that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Coming back to your Visa network of quality, setting that up so that we can make money out of that. I think that's a cracking idea. And I think that whoever sets up this Visa network of quality can also sell other services on the back of that. So once you've got the quality measure, then you're probably going to want some kind of intelligence in there that allows you to, or will act as an agent on your behalf to dynamically vary the quality as you require it. Because if you're paying for quality, you don't want to be operating on a high setting all the time. It'll cost you a fortune. So you want to be running in kind of bulk data transfer mode with crappy quality most of the time until you actually need that low latency, high quality service. So in our case, it's 5 p.m. UK time on a Friday. We want to wind up our quality so we've got super duper quality. For the rest of the time, we're not particularly bothered. And that's going to need some kind of intelligence. So what's your thinking on that, Martin?
Construct appropriate options on it. So allowing people to wait until the last minute and then say, bad quality, I think I'll go to the high class quality, doesn't work.
In fact, anything that relies on people to do stuff is probably a bad idea. You probably want some kind of mechanism or agent that does it for you.
even software doesn't work. Is you need to you're setting options on doing that, and you need to price the option. And if you turn up at the last minute without an option, boy, is this going to cost you. It's because you need to send price signals into the system about the likely future demand and supply.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. So we're talking about dealing in futures on quality.
Yes, that is coming. If you want to have a sustainable infrastructure which is going to allow the level of scaling that a world full of sensors implies, and a world full of AI that is trying to do semi-real-time decisions on a mass global basis, we are orders of magnitude, many orders of magnitude away from being able to do that. So we need to build a whole new kind of infrastructure for the industrial internet, which is performance, scalable, maintainable, private, but a whole series of things by design, and hopefully ethical by design is the top requirement. So the current identity harvesting model of the ad-funded internet, I would like that to make that go away. So, because in the world of wearable tech and pervasive sensors, we are capturing not just what your bank account details are and which flight you're taking. We're capturing intimate biosense data, and you've only got one body, and this is qualitatively different from the kind of mass transactional automation thing we did with the web in the 1990s, and it requires a fundamentally different infrastructure, one which is fit for purpose for that kind of outcome, and we can't do it with the current prototype internet. So we need to recognize what we have at the moment as a prototype.
I can see additional problems coming in later on, where you have to have measures to make sure that some players don't use the quality mechanism as a means of denial of service against others. So if somebody comes bouncing in and buys up all of the quality on a certain network at a certain time, effectively that becomes a denial of service attack for other players, or they might be taking advantage of their power to then resell quality down to smaller people.
If we compare, as has been done several times, the internet access, our channel, our network connection to the internet with electricity or water, only in the oldest buildings or neighborhoods does my extensive use of showering or bathing or whatever affect the water pressure of someone else. In fact, usually it doesn't these days. And certainly electricity, if my neighbor is pulling all kinds of electricity down, he still is not using my electricity. So somehow either the analogy fails or we need some kind of new system, right?
Well, the networks that we use different paradigms, including contention ratio and so on. So we are contending resources that are not available simultaneously to everyone. We are overselling what we are doing. We are overbooking basically already. So
right, exactly. So this is like when you get on a plane and they start asking for volunteers. So yeah. Maybe what they need to do is to ask us all, do you really need the internet? Because if you don't, we'll give you a discount so that your neighbor can watch Netflix. I don't know. This is kind of a funny situation that does not work for analogies with electricity, though, for sure.
No, because both electricity and water are absolutely over-engineered and over-supplied, as we know.
Which means we need to do the same with internet.
We already do, and it's costing too much.
You have elastic computing. The computing is capable of. The computers can absorb anything you can produce in the network, so it doesn't work that way. It's there's also a critical difference, which is that in say the water industry, the water moves at the speed of sound or less. Otherwise, you've got a real problem. And so you can build control signals to manage your water, which go faster than the water. Whereas in the telecoms business, is that lots of what's happening in the network is happening far away, and you can't get the signal there faster than the thing that's happening. So we work at the speed of light. And therefore the nature of the control problem is fundamentally different. And you're also doing it in the context of a highly elastic demand and a statistically multiplexed supply in a distributed system of a fundamentally different nature with all kinds of interacting flows, which are all virtualized, and also you have dueling algorithms attempting to overcome each other in order to get their share of the resource. So it's just that there are no algorithms running in the toilet. It's like trying to get more water than your neighbors. Whereas when Google gives you a new browser upgrade with a new version of HTTP, it is trying to do that. So it's just a fundamentally different world. We'll have to wrap up pretty soon because I have to go for some food.
Right.
Well, I love the idea of dueling algorithms. I think we should rename the whole session "Dueling Algorithms."
So anyway, one very final question. You actually dodged the question of what are we going to call this Delta Q unit? So any bright idea? Are we going to call it a GED?
I think no, definitely not. It should be Davis if anything. It's a
Dave. One Dave or lots of Davies.
Dr. Neil Davis is the person who's the primary mover and progenitor of this whole thing.
I want to be the first person to have a Giga Davis then.
So you're right that having a delta, which is very hard to type, it's Alt-J on a Mac and it's a nightmare on a PC, is not very helpful. However, that's what we've got. And so quality attenuation is the thing. Delta Q is the branch of maths. And so I think if we talk about quality attenuation, that's a series of words we can, they may be a bit geeky, but they're at least typable and searchable. So
yeah, well, you need to have some kind of something on the gauge which will replace the speedtest.net gauge.
Yeah.
And we've got to convince the government that there are better ways of measuring networks than just saying my download speed is less than 2 megabits per second.
Good luck with that. It's already been a struggle to make them understand how the network works.
Yeah.
The regulator in the UK at least is on the case. So good on them.
What? Ofcom? Really?
Yes.
Right. I'm full of optimism and excitement at the news. But anyway, Martin, it's been great having you on, and I think we probably need to get you back again in the near future with the fabled demo. But I'll tell you what, we'll have a little test drive first. We'll work out how we can demonstrate it, make it look really good, and then we'll use it to demonstrate your incredibly clever words to people who might struggle to understand your incredibly clever words.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, I look forward to the Bodhi Geddes dangerous demo of Delta Q. That'll be brilliant.
Another great title, Martin. It's a joy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to come back soon. And I just want to remind people before we cut this off that next week we have the lovely, even lovelier than Martin, and she'll be in person on video, Allison Smith. See you next week. Ciao.